All right, hello and welcome to this presentation on the organizational structure and culture of IW National and Global with emphasis on student account services and the class start. So this chart is a basic layout of the current structure of IW National and Global. At the top we have Dr. Lucas, who is the Chancellor of National and Global. Technically above him is the President of the University and the administration. This, however, is over the entirety of the organization, which consists of 3 divisions or subsidiaries, if you will: IW Marion Traditional Campus, Wesley Seminary, and IW National and Global. This presentation is really only looking at the National and Global subsidiary. Below Dr. Lucas, we have our next level known as the Executive Council, each of which has a unique role to play in the leadership and or departments that they are in charge of. Now, if you'll notice, some of these have these dotted line reporting relationships. These represent employees who answer to more than one member of the Executive Council. For this reason, in an interview, Dr. Lucas described IWU's structure as more of a matrix structure. I would argue against that, saying that's more of a traditional hierarchy with a few exceptions, because if you notice, only 3 of the employees on here have that dotted line. And in actual practice, very few within the organization actually experience this matrix structure. Now, an important note to make, though, on this structure: this diagram is current as of the time of the presentation, but there is a change that has been announced but will not be taking effect until January 1st, 2021. And with this change, a new position is being made within this Executive Council that Dr. Carson Castleman, who is currently VP for Regional Education, will be stepping into and taking over, and he will be replaced with another. And this position will put him in charge of what we call the student-facing departments. These are the departments that deal most directly with students, with the exception of course, the professors. These are the AES department, which is in charge of enrollment and retention, the financial aid department, the student services department, and the student account services department. This is just a emphasis on the student account services department. Currently, under the current structure, council member Rita Pinkerton has control over student account services and over the budget office. And then below Rita in the student account services office, you have our 2 directors and our assistant director of student account services. Renee and Kim are the 2 directors. Christy Boyland, who is actually not pictured here, is the assistant director and holds fairly equal power and authority with Renee and Kim, despite the formality of the terms. But this is how it's structured. However, this is not going to remain the same. With the aforementioned restructuring, student account services will be part of the new student-facing division that is coming up. Again, it's already been announced. Transition has begun, but it won't be taking official until January of 2021. And when that happens, Rita will be exclusively over the budget office. Carson Castleman will be over student account services and other departments. So yeah, the basic structure of the organization runs Dr. Matt Lucas, the chancellor, then the executive council member, department managers, team leaders / supervisors when applicable, and the frontline employees. And authority and rank, of course, the higher up on this chart, the more explicit or defined power they have. The more, what do I mean by explicit power? This is because of their position, because of the official rules and procedures of the organization, not necessarily because of any particular personality or characteristics, but this is how the defined explicit power works. The decision-making model is more, though, from a bottom up. Decisions that affect really only the frontline employee or the team supervisor can be taken care of at that level, the next up the department level, the next up the executive council level. Basically, the point is that only those leaders or individuals directly in charge are in the decision-making process, which of course takes some of the burden off of Dr. Lucas, but also has its potential. Norms and culture. Mission statement. IWU is a Christ-centered academic community committed to changing the world by developing students in character, scholarship, and leadership. Mission statement is meant to be a guiding principle for the organization. Different departments within IWU take this more seriously or handle this differently than others. For example, the financial aid office, people in their annual performance appraisals have to be able to recite this from memory. Other departments like student account services have offered rewards and incentives for knowing this or demonstrating it in their work, but aren't nearly as strict, and this is required as the financial aid. Another element of culture within IWU National and Global is what we call our four postures. These are elements of who we are, of what we do, of the way we act, that are considered important by the executive leadership and are therefore areas where motivation is given, where recognition is given, where emphasis is given, where focus is given. Yeah, as I say, the carrot you hold out is what people will go after, and that's very much true with these four postures. They are loving, learning, sharing, and praying. A few examples in the Student Account Services Office, we have implemented daily prayer as part of our regular duties. 8:15, we meet for announcements, communications, and then there's a prayer time. Other groups, other organizations within the IWU National and Global have also created defined prayer times. Learning. IWU National and Global provides learning opportunities to its employees, for example, through LinkedIn Learning, that are designed to focus on developing employees and helping them to build their skills. And another element of these postures is they've even used the chapels to try and continue to build this within the organizational culture. And then LEAP. This is an acronym that existed when National and Global first came into existence. It's now been kind of repurposed, refurbished, rebranded. Love and educate anyone possible. This is kind of like the motto for National and Global specifically. The mission statement before is the organization as a whole. This is part of National and Global specifically, that we want to be an organization that goes out and loves people, educates people, always looks for those opportunities. Now, IWU and diversity. This is another part of IWU culture, of organizational culture. And IWU, like many organizations, is an equal opportunity employer. And on a larger scale, IWU and National and Global does contain employees of many races and national backgrounds and educational backgrounds and any other identifier you can think of. Specifically at SAS and Diversity Student Account Services, that diversity is not nearly as clearly seen. Currently, SAS has 32 employees, of which 32 are full-time employees and 1 is a part-time student worker. In the area of racial diversity, 31 of those 33 employees are white American. 1 is Hispanic and 1 is Asian. The 1 Asian also happens to be our 1 student worker, who is the only part-time employee in a department of 33. On gender diversity, again, we don't really see much diversity, but it's kind of in the opposite way of what you typically think of. Of the 33 employees, 8 are male, all of them full-time, and female 26, 25 full-time, 1 part-time. On age diversity, we see probably the biggest spread of diversity within student account services. As you can see, we have people from all ages and ranges, but the biggest concentration is in the 30 to 49 group, which accounts for 20 of our 33 employees. And then below the age of 30, we've got 5 employees, 4 full-time and then our student worker, and 50 plus, we have 8. So looking specifically at the class start team, it becomes a little less diverse even within this particular team. Not necessarily by choice, it's just kind of something that happened. Total employees, 5, 4 full-time, and then our 1 student worker is technically part of the class start team. Racial diversity, white 4, Asian 1, and again, that's our 1 student worker. Gender diversity, male 4, female 1. A funny side story, if you remember, there are only 8 male employees in the total department. The class start team, the full-time employees, accounts then for half of them, and at least before COVID hit, we all shared the same office space, so it came to be known eventually as the man cave. Age diversity, at the age of 21 is our 1 student worker, then 29, 31, 31, and 40. So in the class start team specifically, right on both sides of that 30 marker, 31 and 29, is where we see the largest concentration age-wise, and then we've got our 2 outliers, 40 and 21. Other considerations, culture of caring and knowing. IW National and Global has part of their unspoken culture and unspoken values that we care for each other, we want to get to know each other. You know, it's not just all business. You might, on a phone call, take care of your business, but maybe there are a few questions in there like, oh, what are you going to be doing this weekend? How's the family? Things like that. And it's a big part of the culture that we want to care about each other and know each other. But on a more negative side, there is an issue with power and conformity. Power refers to an individual's ability to enforce influence, enforce decisions, enforce change within an organization. And with that, there are many different types of power. There is information power, which comes from being able to withhold information. That kind is typically toxic. There is expertise power, which again comes from having skill, but is less toxic because this usually develops from being really good at your job, not necessarily from withholding facts and information like information power. There's explicit power, which comes from defined roles, defined rules, defined regulations, things like that. There is cultural power that comes from who the person is, their ability to influence. Maybe they're not necessarily in a defined role that gives them power because of their personality and because of the reputation they have. They're still able to exert a certain amount of power. Now, conformity, on the other hand, refers to a culture's expectation that you're just going to step in line, you're going to do what you're supposed to, you're going to do things the same way everyone else does, you're going to follow the cultural norms. Now, where this all comes into play is there is a cultural element that if someone has more power than you are going to conform. And where this becomes problematic is sometimes these powers, these influences are used to sidestep processes, used to push certain agendas, used to step across department lines, and there is an expectation that if you're the frontline employee on the bottom of the totem pole, you're just going to do what's expected. For an example, coming from the class start team perspective, part of the class start team's role is to monitor incoming students, make sure that they have the financial means to pay for their program, and if they're able to prove that, then move them on to student services to be registered for their classes. So a big part of the role of that team is to watch out for bad credit risks to the university and be kind of a first line of defense against situations where students come in, incur high bills, high debts, don't have the means to pay for it, drop out, and IWU is stuck writing off a huge debt. However, it has happened in the past where different individuals with power have asked for rules to be bent, for rules to be ignored, or have even gone around the class start team and just told student services, I know the student's cleared, but register them. And the reasons vary. Some are understandable reasons, like a student's just simply having issues getting this form filled out. We're fairly confident they'll get it done in time. Some of them are well-intentioned, like the student's been having a bad experience, we just want to make it as smooth as possible. But it's never without consequences. Sometimes the consequences are as small as just some confusion and some questions, how did this student get registered? Other times, though, it's been more significant in terms of 4- and 5-figure debts being eaten by the university because a student was registered and was not able to pay for their courses. So decision-making model, we kind of touched this before, but IWU National Global tends to emphasize a bottom-up decision-making model, where employees and supervisors are encouraged to make decisions for themselves regarding their day-to-day work and collaborate on interdepartmental initiatives. An example, the Fort Wayne pilot. The current supervisor for the class start team is Jeff Panazzo. His predecessor was named Lee. Back in January of 2019, Lee and leaders from the AES department came together to try and figure out a way to make the clearing process quicker and more efficient. And what came out of it was a secured online document where where students that the enrollment were pretty sure were clearable could be put on the list and moved to the front of the line for review, cleared, and out of the way as quickly as possible. This decision only took Lee, the leadership of the class start team, and the leadership of the AES employees in the Fort Wayne office. It was an interdepartmental decision, but did not have to go all the way up to Dr. Lucas. This is the decision-making model that National and Global tends to emphasize. And the strength, it empowers employees, takes advantage of frontline knowledge. You may be at the top, and you may have your degree, you may have your experience, but that doesn't change the fact that the frontline employees are still dealing with the customers, in this case the students, on a daily basis. And therefore, there is sometimes knowledge and expertise that these individuals can offer that otherwise might not be available to the top levels of leadership, and it reduces workload for top leadership. Weaknesses, it's vulnerable to confusion, conflict, and chaos. The benefit of top-down decision making is that it keeps the decisions uniform, keeps the decisions consistent, keeps the processes consistent. Bottom up, there may be different processes in various different parts of the organization that could conflict with each other. Now, when this happens, National and Global tends to emphasize, okay, let's sit down, let's talk it out, let's figure this out. How can everyone adjust what they're doing so that these conflicts do not continue? But unfortunately, they still do arise. They still have to be sorted out from time to time. So let's look at the class start team and kind of the job analysis. Of course, as it stands right now, Dr. Lucas is at the top, followed by Rita, Kim, who's one of the directors, then Jeff, who's the class start supervisor. Now, when the change goes into effect in January, Rita will be replaced by Dr. Carson Castleman, and will actually be adding another level between Kim and Dr. Castleman. That's Renee. Renee, when the changes go into effect, will be higher than Kim and Christy in the official order of command. But from Jeff down, we do not see any change. And below Jeff, we have Jeremy Vardaman, Stephen Howlett, myself, Drake Buddy, and Risa. You also see that we have these defined names behind us: class start level 3, class start level 2, class start level 1, and the intern/student worker. This refers to a fairly new means of employee expertise, seniority recognition, incentive, etc., that was implemented in January of this year, 2020. It's called the Stratification Initiative, where for every position there are technically 5 levels: entry level, level 1, level 2, level 3, and then the supervisor. Now, supervisor, that's a little different than the other levels. Entry level, everyone starts off there. Then once they've been in the job for a year and are considered competent, they move up to level 1. But after that, you have to apply and get approved for levels 2 and levels 3. And these are not intended to be indications of explicit power. Technically, in explicit terms, Jeremy, Stephen, and myself are all on the same level. But there is still kind of an informal power and an expertise power that comes with it. Jeremy holds the term level 3. Stephen holds the term level 1, I hold the term level, or Stephen holds level 2, I hold the term level 1. That's intended to be an indication that Jeremy knows more about the job than Stephen, Stephen knows more about the job than I do. And in reality, that's probably true, and this creates a form of expertise power within the class start team, which is why I'm showing in the diagram there's also differences in levels in these dotted lines. they represent the flow of expertise power. And of course, at the bottom, we have our part-time student worker, who is the newest at the job and has the least amount of expertise and experience. Additionally, because of COVID concerns, I myself have been the only one in the office consistently and not doing a work at home, work at the office cycle, which has also created a form of informal power between myself and Risa, in that being the most consistently there, I work with her the most consistently and the most often, which creates this level of comfort that if she has a question, I tend to be the first person she tries to talk to. This has created some issues in the past because as the supervisor, technically she should be following Jeff. She should be going to him, not necessarily to me. And we have tried to correct that because the explicit power is with Jeff. But because of situations and comfort levels, there's the informal power, the informal authority, the informal expertise that exists there. In addition, there's also the division of duties. We all have different days that we are expected to do different tasks. Some of these tasks are shared, for example, the phones and the emails. Phone days means you're answering the phone, email days means you're doing the emails. Free days, that's just there for you to catch up on the other work that you have to do. And as you can see from this chart, those duties are divided up so that for the four full-time individuals, there's always one person on emails, one person on a free day, and two people manning the phones. Risa is a little bit different. She splits her time between budget office and student accounts class starts. And as the student worker focuses more on the busy work, mainly some forms we have to process known as the FBA, AMEF, and discounts. In addition, the four full-times have special defined duties that are uniquely theirs. For Jeff, it's his supervisory duties plus the Fort Wayne pilot that we discussed earlier. Jeremy class calls, these are emails that set up a prediction of what they expect to start in terms of batches of cohorts, clusters, groups of students starting together at once. Late ads, this duty sometimes gets shared by the whole team when it's busy. These are students who are cleared after the deadline and we're trying to still get them in. Pre-bills, these are estimates of upcoming costs. Closing lists, which are lists of different groups and clusters that are pulled from the class call list. They're divided among the four full-time members to create final lists of who was cleared. And then VESTA, this is an organization IWU partners with to recruit students internationally for our master's and doctoral programs in business. And he deals with these students as they are typically unique situations. You'll see he has the largest load of the three of us, but that's again because of that expertise power that he has. He's been there the longest and he knows the most people from other departments and therefore just simply holds a lot more skill and a lot more knowledge in terms of the big picture. Stephen has reentry duties, which these are students who were at IWU, left for whatever reason, and now they're back. And the daily cleared list, these are lists of students who have been cleared that we send to Student Account Services to be registered. Myself, there is the deferrals. This is a payment method where if a student can prove they are receiving reimbursement from their employer for educational expenses, they can pay cash for their program, but have deadline to do so pushed back from 2 weeks before the class begins to 30 days after it ends. I process these forms and set them up. The Wesley Seminary pilot is a pilot program Wesley Seminary is setting up with the Spanish-speaking students that I deal with specifically. The Bachelor's of Information Services Web Development cluster, I deal specifically with closing and clearing these students because, again, it's a little unique. Some of the courses IW doesn't actually teach themselves, but rather outsources the teaching. And distribution of review lists. Every week we pull a list of students who are starting within the next 6 weeks. We divide them up among the 4 of us, and as part of our regular duties, we look at each of these students either once or twice, depending on how close we are to their program start, to see if we can clear them. I prepared these lists. Now, in addition to these defined duties, we also have what are called job backups. Technically, all 4 members of the team are expected to be familiar with everyone's duties, the one exception being Jeff and his supervisory duties. But each person has a defined backup partner that if they're gone but their partner's here, then their duties automatically fall onto that partner. These combinations are Jeremy and Jeff, and then myself and Steven, which also kind of makes sense because Jeremy and Jeff, they have the most expertise, power, if you will. They have the most experience, the most skill. They've been the longest, and they have the most difficult duties. Steven and myself were the newest. We don't have as much experience and skill, and our duties are a little simpler. So basically, if Steven's gone, it falls to me. If I'm gone, it falls to Steven. But if Steven and I are both gone, then Jeremy and Jeff can decide between the 2 of them who's covering what. That's how that works. So the performance improvement and performance appraisal process. Performance appraisal is basically the process by which employees' improvement and current status is evaluated. So outside of the class start team, there are 2 ways through which an employee is appraised. There is the troubled employee situation where the employee is creating specific issues and they are put on a performance improvement plan, from which the question is, was it successful? Did they improve? If the answer is no, then there are 2 options: plan extension in hopes of improvement or termination. And if it was successful, then they're back in good standing. When an employee is on this performance improvement plan, it means that there is significant issue with the way they are performing on the job, and they are no longer considered an employee in good standing. But they can get that back, and if they do, great, no problem. And there's the standard evaluation, which only occurs once a year, typically towards the end of the fiscal year in June. And this consists of 3 stages: employee self-assessment, supervisory assessment, and then the review meeting where both assessments are reviewed and goals are set and progress from the previous year's goals evaluated. And then with the class start team specifically, the performance improvement plan, troubled employee, it's the exact same process. But the class start team adds these, we call them one-on-ones. They are meetings that occur quarterly, which are a smaller version of the formal appraisal process, through which the supervisor, currently Jeff, meets privately with each individual to discuss strengths, weaknesses, opportunities for improvement, define goals, things like that. These quarterly meetings together build up into the self-assessment, supervisor assessment, and annual review. One of the drawbacks being, of course, this takes a little bit more time and energy, but it pays off when the appraisal process comes because there's not really any surprises. It also helps because issues are caught quicker instead of being left to drag on until the annual appraisal happens or we get to the performance improvement plan stage. And so these problems are resolved that much. So, potential issues with the appraisal process. Relative ranking. This is a term where what we're saying here is that ranking and success are not clearly defined, but rather are based off of opinion and feeling. For example, in school, typically on a test, whatever percentage of the questions you get right is a percentage grade, which then translates to a letter grade on a defined scale. This is what we call defined ranking. This is specific. You know how to judge the way the ranking is occurring, whereas relative ranking would be more like you're in a talent show and the audience is going to vote on who their favorite is. It's based off of perception, it's based off of opinion. There's not really a defined objective. This is the standard by which we are evaluating. Going back to performance and appraisal process, the employee in their appraisal is basically giving their opinion. And the supervisor is giving their opinion. And in the meeting, these opinions are trying to be reconciled. This is relative ranking. And it can sometimes make it difficult to define, are we reaching our goals? Are we making progress? Are we improving? And then no controls over bias. As long as the employee and the supervisor both sign off on the appraisal, then there's really no extra review, no extra looking at it. And it makes it very easy for supervisors to like a particular employee more than another, to be harsher on a particular employee more than another. There's really no internal means by which to make sure that these appraisals are being done objectively and not with some kind of bias, some kind of intentional favoritism, or even unintentional favoritism. Other awards and incentives. Stratification. I already mentioned this. This is a means by which employees are given higher ranks, which is meant to not necessarily indicate explicit power, but expertise and added seniority that also brings with it higher pay levels. Shout-outs. This is where Rita has received a specific compliment on an employee, and so in the morning meetings, that employee is recognized and receives a prize, usually in the form of a $10 gift card. Staff council. This is a group of individuals from across the university who their whole job or their whole purpose in being on the staff council, this is a volunteer position in addition to the regular duties, is to create opportunities for employees to engage, to interact, to have something fun. And the social committee, which is a smaller version of the staff council that deals specifically with student account services. Unfortunately, due to COVID, a lot of what these two groups normally do has been suspended, not indefinitely, hopefully. Eventually, the plan is to bring them back, but concerns that come from the COVID virus make it a little difficult to function and do what these normally do. And the Superhero Mindset Awards, these are recognitions given out across the university, where Dr. Lucas himself recognizes people who have gone above and beyond, the superheroes, or who have done a really good job at demonstrating at least one of the 4 postures: loving, learning, sharing, and praying. And they receive this plaque, if you will, that they can put outside their office and are recognized in front of all of IWU National and Global. It's a way to motivate people to strive towards these. Some recommendations. Number 1, improve collaboration. IWU National and Global has come a long way in terms of where it once was to where it is today in the area of collaboration. But more improvement is needed to reach maximum efficiency as an organization. Better performance reviews. The performance reviews only occur once a year and in many departments are seen as a hassle to get through rather than an opportunity to improve. A cultural shift in this area would be helpful. Adding SMART goals could also be helpful. Capitalize on culture of caring and knowing, and clear definitions of power and conformity expectations. So improve collaboration. So at one point you could define IWU as each department is its own silo. We have our own information, we have our own processes, our own procedures, and we're going to protect that as much as we can. Since Dr. Lucas has come, he's focused a lot on breaking down that culture and getting information to move cross-departmentally, which has improved collaboration, but there's still more opportunity to improve. One way is the use of co-working space. This might be a little harder to do during COVID, but one benefit of the COVID is that we now have these laptops and these opportunities to work away from our typical offices. Once COVID goes away, an opportunity to improve is maybe to create more spaces where employees from different departments are encouraged to go and work in the same space. This way it's easier to talk and to share information cross-departmentally and maybe find these ways in which we can improve our processes and even work better together as a cohesive. Cross-departmental events. Something that's been helpful for the Class Start Student Account Services was that we got to meet members of the AES team in our Fort Wayne and Indianapolis North offices to discuss how our jobs interact. This has helped to improve trust, to improve efficiency, to talk out some issues of conflict and sources of disagreement, and to improve the processes. Other such events could help, again, find opportunities for better processes, for more efficient running, for new ideas on how to improve the student experience and the such. Improve the performance feedback process. First off, there is the perceived value. As said before, many see this as more of a hassle. They really don't like to do it. But this is one of the best opportunities to improve employee performance. And if we can communicate that through emphasis from top leadership, through emphasizing the values, emphasizing the benefits, it could change this cultural shift. And if we could change this element of the culture, we can see better productivity, reduce chances of getting on the performance improvement plan, better reviews that can help get promotions, and understanding how important performance reviews or appraisals, also called appraisals, impact the overall strategy of the organization. Emphasizing these benefits could help change that culture. So use of the performance appraisal to better develop the culture within IWU National and Global. I already used the example that financial aid makes their employees be able to recite from memory the mission statement. Similar objectives dealing with the mission statement, also with LEAP and with the 4 postures, could help develop elements of the culture that leadership wants to see developed. For example, maybe adding a goal every year to see improvement in one of the 4 posture areas. Maybe improve on praying, improve on loving, maybe you learn so many new skills over the course of the year, things like that. Let's go back, specific. Yes, we do have a specific goal. That goal is 95% accuracy. Measurable. Yes, we count how many of these calculation sheets have been done, how many were perfect, how many had errors, and convert that into a percentage. Achievable. And an 8% improvement over the course of 1 year certainly is realistic and certainly is achievable. Time bound. Yes, this goal must be hit within 1 year's time. Therefore, this is a good example of a SMART goal. Because all these elements are hit, when the appraisal process comes back the following year, it's also easy to look back and use more objective means of ranking, more objective means of evaluation, instead of just simply, do I think you improve, the relative ranking. In addition to the implementation of SMART goals, IW might consider implementing a means of appealing accusations of bias. So right now, if I'm an employee at IWU and I feel that in the appraisal process, I am being harshly judged because of bias, all I really can do is refuse to sign the appraisal, which means I just simply don't agree with what the supervisor is saying. Still goes into my record though. IWU might want to consider creating some means by which if an employee believes that's happening, they can file an appeal, they can bring someone in to investigate to see, is bias occurring, and if so, what can we do to change it? Another suggestion that's not really here on the slide is maybe adding more of those smaller appraisal opportunities. Going back to the class start example, where we have those quarterly meetings. Maybe something similar, doesn't necessarily have to be quarterly meetings. Maybe it's just a written assessment, maybe it's just a team meeting to discuss successes and failures, something like that, so that way there is more frequent looking at progress and performance, and these issues are caught quicker and corrected quicker before they become big issues, putting employees on performance improvement plans or creating unpleasant appraisal processes. Capitalize on culture of caring and knowing. As Christ followers, we're expected to love each other, and we have a culture of caring that has created tight bonds in the past. So we can work on that aspect of our culture in the onboarding process and in bringing in new employees, and we can bring in more events that facilitate getting to know some of your coworkers better. This also goes back to the idea of more interdepartmental meetings. This part might be a little more difficult with COVID, but thanks to Zoom and other technologies, it may still be possible despite. And clearer definitions on power and conformity. As said before, one issue is that people with explicit power versus people without it, those without it are expected to just simply conform, and when there's any kind of pushback, it is sometimes met harshly. So IW National and Global may want to consider defining limits and expectations of power, as well as power against university policies and the extent to which lower level employees can resist power. So what I mean by this is sitting down and defining, okay, here are the situations in which you can step over department lines and make requests of employees. These are situations in which you can bend the rules, situations in which you cannot bend the rules. These rules cannot be sidestepped. These can in certain situations. Here's the defined objective criteria for that, and communicating these expectations across the whole university. So that then, number one, leadership knows, okay, in this situation, I do have the right to make this demand. And then when they do, if the employee fights back, well, because the expectations have been defined, there's an objective means by which to say, sorry, you need to conform in this situation. But if the leadership is overstepping, the employee can now go back to the defined expectations and can back up their refusal, their unwillingness to conform, and if leadership pushes, why, there is a means of defending themselves. This could reduce conflict, it could reduce areas of misunderstanding, could reduce all sorts of potential issues, just simply sitting down and having that power more defined, more drawn out, instead of just simply, this person's higher up, therefore they got power, you do what they ask.